This is a concise video on care for landscape plants. There is no fluff. Information comes from university-created and peer-reviewed resources, which are cited at the end. This video has 3 simple parts: pre-installation care and planting, first day care, and ongoing care. Part 1. Pre-installation care and planting. Proper handling before the plant hits the ground is vital for its long-term survival. Transport. Always keep leaves toward the center of the vehicle or trailer and cover them with a wind tarp. Leaves exposed to wind will dry out and turn brown. Avoid plastic tarps as they trap heat and burn foliage. Next is a good 8-minute video on landscape layout made by Pretty Purple Door Garden Design. I'd like you to listen for 2 things. What are the consequences for incorrect spacing? And how would you know the mature sizes?
You know that many of us are suffocating our plants and we don't even know it? In this video, I want to go over some really simple ways for spacing your plants out in the right way so that they can not only survive but thrive in your garden. Figuring out the spacing of my plants was one of my biggest issues when I was a new gardener. It seemed impossible to me that a tiny little plant I purchased at the nursery could possibly grow to 8 feet or even 12 feet high and wide. That just seemed crazy to me. This is why I talk so much about plant spacing in my Design Your 4-Season Garden course. Here's one of my students' gardens, and you can see how sparse it looked when she planted it and how quickly it actually filled in. She did a really great job properly spacing out her plants so they have room to grow. So I thought it was a great example to share with you. What I see so often is new gardeners planting monster shrubs like this about 1 foot from their foundation and way too close together. Can anyone relate to this? It just causes so much extra maintenance when you don't take the mature size of your plants and your shrubs into account when you first plant them. Or the other thing that I see a lot is planting shrubs that are way too small for the location. And I'm not trying to embarrass or discourage any new gardeners here. Quite the opposite, actually. I made a lot of these same mistakes when I was a beginner, and it cost me years and lots of money because I had to remove so many things, move them around when they outgrew the space, and it wasn't fun. In fact, you can see a lot of my mistakes in this video right here, and I'll leave a link to that in the description below as well so you could watch. So take it from me, it's definitely worth reading the plant tag and doing some research on the particular shrub you're looking at before you actually plant it. If you're feeling overwhelmed with this process, like I said, I cover plant research extensively in my Design Your 4-Season Garden course. And here are some of the fun ways that my students work all of that out with the plant research. It's a really fun activity. So here's a post that I recently saw in a Facebook gardening group, and it's a very typical post. Here the hydrangeas are planted way too close to the foundation of the home. It's a common mistake, but this can be a really costly one. My concern with this planting is that even if these are dwarf hydrangeas that only get to be 3 or 4 feet high and wide, they're still incredibly close to the foundation of the home. And most of the non-dwarf common varieties of hydrangeas can reach anywhere from 6 to 12 feet high and wide. If that's the case, these shrubs will definitely outgrow their space and grow over the window and block out the natural light from the home. So this is something that you really need to take into consideration, especially when we're talking about foundation planting. So how do you space out these plants correctly? Here's a guide for how to space a 4-foot high by 5-foot wide shrub along a 25-foot foundation. So really just think about the width, the 5-foot wide. So when you have a shrub that grows 5 feet wide, you're actually planting from the center where the trunk is. So you would really only need a 2.5-foot circle around the entire shrub because that's the radius. So from that center point out to the edge would be 2.5 feet, only half the width. When it comes to a foundation planting, I would definitely add another 1 or 2 feet between the plant and your house if you have the space to do that. So in this case, for a 5-foot shrub, the shrub's trunk would be planted approximately 3.5 to 4.5 feet from the home's foundation. with a minimum of 2.5 feet around it on all the other sides. If it helps you to picture the size of the shrub, just mark off the spot where the trunk is and then draw a circle in the dirt around so you can kind of tell where it will be when it will fill in. That's helped me a lot. So at a very, very minimum, with a foundation planting, you would want at least 1 foot of open space between the full-size plant and the foundation. So a 5-foot shrub, you need 2.5 feet, you would add another foot. So a minimum of 3.5 feet is where that shrub will be planted. From shrub to shrub, you'd want a minimum of 5 feet from trunk to trunk because it's in the center, so you need 2.5, but then the next one you'd need 2.5 as well. So from trunk to trunk, it would be 5 feet total. Here, the shrub foliage, if you planted 5 feet apart, it would actually touch the plant next to it, but it wouldn't become so overcrowded that the shrubs would suffer or anything like that. So if you want that nice full look where the shrubs are actually touching each other, just plant it exactly as the plant label says. And in an ideal world, we would make our beds larger, deeper, and plant even further from the foundation, leaving about 2 feet of space between the full-grown shrub and the foundation. This is going to do a lot of things. It's going to help with the shrubs actually touching your siding or the roots affecting the foundation in any way. And it'll also give you a little bit of space if you ever need to walk back there and do a little bit of maintenance. And here's just an example of it where it's 4.5 feet from that foundation point. And you can see that there's about 2 feet space after the full-grown shrub is in. If you spaced 5-foot shrubs 6 feet apart from trunk to trunk, this would allow them to grow to their full size and they actually wouldn't touch each other. So if you're looking for just a little bit more space so that every shrub is individual instead of touching, you would want to add maybe an extra foot or so in between the shrubs. And if you've planted too close together or too close to your foundation, you don't have to worry. You can always move your shrubs and your other plants. It's much easier to do this while they're still young. Whether they're young or not young, make sure that you do this when the weather is cooler. Don't do it in the middle of the summer. Don't ever do it when the plant is actually in bloom. You could really damage your plant doing that. So wait until early spring or later in the fall to move your shrub, and that will reduce the risk of shock and losing your shrubs altogether. But you can move them. What about choosing the right size shrubs for your foundation planting so they're not too big or small for the space? I showed a lot of examples of what's too big and what's too small, so what do you actually do? What's a good size? I have some tips for that too. As a rule of thumb, when you're planting the edges of your home, so the left and the right side flanking your house, just take a look at your house from the front. If you draw a line from your front door to 2/3 of the height of your home, that's a pretty good indicator of how tall of a plant you need. So you can see in this drawing I drew that bright blue line from the center of the door to the edges. And because this is a split level home, the shrub on the left is a bit taller and higher than the one on the right. And I just want to point out that this is just a rule of thumb. Please don't take anything I say and use it against yourself. These are just rules of thumb. If you don't really know where to start, that's a good indication of about how tall you would need for a shrub flanking the corners of your house so that it doesn't look dwarfed or too small or too big for the space. It's not an absolute law or anything. This is just a guideline. When choosing the other foundation shrubs and plants in between those two sides that are flanking, the only thing that you need to do is just make sure that you're not blocking your walkways, your windows, or any access points you have. So if you have a window that starts at 4 feet high, just make sure, unless you want to block that window, there are cases where if that's a bedroom or something, you may want to block that space or have a little bit more privacy. But in most cases, you wouldn't want to block the window, so just measure from the ground to the bottom of the window and make sure that you're choosing a shrub or a plant of some kind that's appropriate to that size. And also be really cognizant of the walkways so that you're not planting too close where the shrubs are going to encroach on the walkway and kind of shrink it. And lastly, the access points. So if you have any meters that need to be read, that's another reason why you would plant a little bit further out from the foundation so somebody could actually walk back there and read the meter. So you just want to give a little bit extra space for those things. Even if you want to block them, just make sure there's a way for somebody who needs to read the meter to actually get in there and do what they need to do. You also want to make sure that the space still feels really balanced. So here you can see the photo on the left isn't very balanced because there's nothing anchoring the right side of the house and there's a lot of weight in that tiny center area. You can see kind of how it's mounded up and it's just heavy in that center. On the photo on the right, there's a better balance to the landscape and the house is anchored by these taller plants that sort of match up with that 2/3 rule on either side of the building. Again, just a guideline. You can see the one on the left is a little bit smaller, and that's totally okay. I actually have a whole article about balance with lots of drawings and examples, and I'll leave a link to that in the description below. And I'll see you over in the next video.
So, how on earth would you know the mature sizes? Read the tag. That's simple. If there's a range, take the average. Also, know that shade can reduce the mature size. If that's the case, you'll need to lean on someone with experience. So questions to consider. What should you do if you think a designer's layout should be changed? Well, at this company, you make that change. And you do what's right for long-term success. Bring in the customer or manager and do the following. Bring up the idea, showing your concern. Have the designer's back. You don't know the full story, so never put down someone's idea. For example, you could say that you can see the logic, but now that you're actually working and in it, this might be a better solution. Second, present at least 2 solutions and their benefits. And 3, do it. Make it happen. Ensure that it happens and communicate those changes to the office. FYI, having this flexibility to improve a plan completely goes against the grain of this industry. Staff at other companies will say, oh well, if that's what they want, that's what they get. I've seen it happen, even at the most well-respected companies. They miss the chance to show off their practical thinking and skills. Show off that you have the honesty, character, and expertise to do what's right over what you're told. Here, that's expected and rewarded. Finally, the skill of fronting plants. Fronting is another term for putting your best face forward. This skill sets you apart. Face the best looking side of shrubs, evergreens, and trees toward the customer. For trees, look for bends in the trunk and even branching. Ask coworkers to stand where the customer would to help. Immediate care. Water plants when you get to the install location. Unload them into a shady spot and water pot to pot, avoiding spraying the leaves to ensure moisture reaches the roots. Installation. The most important part of a plant is the root flare. It must sit at the soil level. The most common problem affecting plants today is planting the root flare too deep or smothering them in mulch or grass. To avoid death, ensure the following. Position the root flare at or slightly above the soil level. Keep mulch away from the root flare. Snip roots that are encircling the trunk to prevent girdling. Methods. We plant utilizing wet installs or dry installs. We would do a wet install when planting trees and in muddy conditions. Wet installs are putting the plant in the hole at the correct depth, filling the hole halfway with soil, snaking a slow-running hose around the root ball to create a chowder consistency that eliminates air pockets and breaks down mud clumps, then filling the hole. Dry installs are more common. This is for average soil conditions, planting perennials and small shrubs. Dig the hole, plant, and pack the soil around the root ball by jamming your heel twice on each side, more around larger root balls. Regardless of the install method, gently break up the root ball to loosen the roots or slice shallow cuts to disrupt circling roots. Try not to cut more than 10% of the total root ball. B&B plants. For balled and burlap plants, keep the cage and burlap intact, as removing them increases mortality. A study at the U of Nebraska concluded that it's better to leave the burlap and cage on, finding that movement damages roots. They also concluded that roots simply absorb the cage into the root system as they grow. Undo, then peel back the burlap and cage top to locate the root flare. Adjust the height in the hole. Rip off burlap and break wire off the top when possible. Otherwise, turn it outward and tuck the excess into the hole. Water using the wet method while filling with soil. Part 2, first day care. The first day is entirely about survival through watering. Direct watering. Use a hose to water directly at the base of each plant. Do not rely on sprinklers or lawn irrigation. Lawn systems are frequent, shallow waterings, whereas landscape plants require less frequent, deep soakings. Mulch absorbs surface water before it reaches the roots. This is why we don't rely on lawn irrigation during establishment. Part 3, ongoing care. Proper watering is the most critical factor for success. First, you have to care. If you choose to rely on lawn irrigation, I want to share a saying taught at the Naval War College. Hope is not a strategy. The initial period, this is weeks 1 and 2. Water all plants daily if it is breezy or above 80 degrees. If cooler, like 60s, low 70s, every other day is fine. Establishment period, this is weeks 3 through 8. Plants need at least 1 inch of water per week. Only rainfall over a 1/4 inch counts towards this total. So how much do I water? Perennials, 15 seconds at the base. Repeat. Shrubs, 30 seconds at the base. Repeat. Trees get 30 seconds per inch of trunk width. And repeat. Slow-growing trees, slow-growing evergreens, including boxwoods, shade gardens, and areas with high moisture such as heavy clay soils require less frequent watering. Twice a week after the first 2 weeks. Keep in mind that measurable rain exceeding a 1/4 inch contributes to their weekly totals. Plants that are blooming must be watered daily if they're in the hot summer sun. Hydrangea blooms, for example, tend to dry out and turn brown during their establishment period. This is cosmetic. Continue watering. Cut the dried blooms off to tidy the plant's appearance. Sometimes they'll rebloom later. If not, they'll return and bloom the following season. Seasonality. Watering frequently decreases in the fall, but plants require damp roots until the ground freezes. This can be as late as December. Just because you want to wrap up the hose doesn't mean plants don't need the water. In subsequent seasons, intermittent watering is sufficient, though tree roots should still be soaked during dry spells when you start to notice the lawn browning. A small tree needs watering for the first 2 years. Larger trees for about 4 years, especially if it's a drought year.